Hey everyone, I'm going to quickly go over the build here in the GT502 case. I don't have much time before I have to put this case into a Pelican case and ship it off to Las Vegas. I just finished this build literally this morning, getting the bubbles out. So I don't have much time to go into deep dive of the case and so forth. But I did want to quickly go over my build overview inside this case. Once again, this is a ASUS GT502 TUF. I have the Horizon boundless variant here. The only difference being is there's no longer a kind of a white border in the middle here in terms of the glass. Otherwise, it is the same as the regular GT502. For those of you that watched the B-roll in the beginning, you'll notice that I have no barrier in the glass. And that is really the only difference between the boundless version they call Horizon and the original version. Now, quick notes on what I've done here. This blue stripe on the side, as well as the B-roll, that is painted. I removed that, painted it. So that's why it's not silver. The blue doesn't match the blue I have inside the PC. Actually, it did before, but that enamel paint I was using was not bonding. And it was a, primed metal. It just wasn't. It was still tacky after like 2 days, and I only had 4 days to work on this thing, so I couldn't take the risk of it not drying. So I stripped it and I immediately repaint. I just used spray paint with something like the Bare Home Depot spray paint that I know dries to the touch within like 12 hours. And I put a layer of clear on it real quick. That's, dries within 24 hours. So by the time this thing has foam over it and everything, it's not going to just come off. Right? So that's why it doesn't match the rest of the blue too well. This is the ASUS TUF Z890 Pro Wi-Fi. It's the same as the black, essentially the black version, just it's they didn't anodize the aluminum. It's got a clear on it, so it looks the way it does. It also has that kind of attachment on the rear I/O panel, which I didn't put on because I thought it looked kind of tacky because it's plastic. So this actually looks nicer than me. Spec-wise, it is running an Intel, I think it's 265 here, and a Strix 4090 simply because this is also going to the Bitspower booth afterwards, after the ASUS event. So I kind of needed a block with rear ports, and this is the only block with rear ports for ASUS cards that would fit in the case. That's what I want to get into first. If you're water cooling in this case, and you're water cooling a taller card, which is pretty much every card except for an FE, which you're going to have issues with the terminals hitting the case. So you're going to need something with the ports on the rear. So water cool, biscuit, anything like that, you'll be fine. Unless you want to vertical mount the GPU block. Now, I can't do that in my scenario because I have, guys, I'm going to be rotating the camera at the same time. I'm really sorry about the rush. So in my case, I put a 360 radiator on the bottom. By default, this case does not support a 360 radiator on the bottom. But what you can do is you can get offsets, because it's really just the original slot alignment. If you were to mount the radiator, the fans would hit the motherboard. So all you really need to do is just offset it over that 5-8 millimeters or so. So if you're a 3D printer, you can 3D print the offsets. You might even be able to use the Lanley offsets from the O11 Mini to do this, and you can get a 360 on the bottom. So that's what I've done here. I made my own offsets, I 3D printed them, and that is what allows me to mount the radiator on the bottom like so. So by default, there is a radiator mount on the rear of the case where the ports then face this side, but it's not practical. It's more for AIO usage because the amount of space you have coming through here is very narrow. So you're going to need like 14 millimeter fittings, 12 millimeter fittings, to kind of just even get the tube through. And it's just not attractive. So the rear radiator mount on the back of the case, I'm going to show you guys the back in a second, is really meant for AIO use only. And I would just say save that spot for an FLT. You'll have a lot easier over time. All right. Now, a little bit of layout the loop. So this is a distro and a screen holder. I have the Bitspower CR120 behind it on the other side. It's feeding through at the bottom here, coming through this radiator, going into the distro, into the GPU in, come out from the GPU out, into the CPU in, into the CPU out, to the top radiator, and that goes back to the Bitspower CR120 on the other side. So the keen-eyed among you may have realized that you've never seen this Bitspower block, and you probably never will, because this is a one of one. Reason being one of one is because, one, the block is not out yet. This is a, I think, prototype, functioning prototype. And the finish that the block comes in, it's black. It's a black block. But what I've done is I've sandblasted the original bracket and cover that's holding onto the plexi. And then after sandblasting it, I sanded it to just brighten it up a little bit. And I took a Scotch Brite red pad and just kind of gave it that brushed aluminum look. So that's what you're looking at. So while I hope, I'm going to suggest they release this block in silver, because I think it looks much better this way than it does with the black, especially for guys that want to do, like, you know, whiteboards. We got a lot of them this time with Z890 and X670E from Aorus, Asus. You have so many choices of silver and whiteboards now that it really needs to be a silver-based, kind of brightish block. All right. The memory is Asgard RAM. For those of you interested. I'm not sure which. I think they're SK Hynix. They generally work very well for me, so I have no complaints about that. And the block itself here, like I was saying, this is a 4090 Strix block with the active backplate, and pretty much cable mod cables. And this block, by default, is very saggy, because what they've done is, most water block companies now, they will attach something to connect the I/O bracket of the GPU to the water block itself. Bitspower did not do this for this block, which is a real shame, because the block is very heavy once you have all that stuff on it. So part of my design process in this loop was to have this distro. You'll notice that this 3D printed part that snaps on, this cover over here, if you can see that, this cover actually touches the fan point over here and behind it. That was to actually help prop this thing up from sagging. So yes, if you're wondering, I'm actually using little D plugs right in between there, and that's what's kind of holding it together. Now, if you're thinking, is this fragile? No, because this is acetal. It's not going to crack like epoxy. But yeah, so this is actually helping this thing stay straight. Because if this thing wasn't touching, this whole thing would be sagging about by 5 millimeters, which is horrific. First off, I didn't do a great job wire management. I didn't have the time. So it is what it is. But I think it's okay for the intended purpose. You can still see I still have bubbles in here, but it's not too bad. I did some type of wire management. I forgot to zip tie the pump wire. I'll probably do that later. But you see guys here, this is my USB cable for the screen. I'll probably zip tie it now that I see it. But yeah, so general small zip tying. I zip tied all the wires to the fans up on the very top here so you don't see them. The TUF fans I'm using are the TUF 120 RGB fans, and the bottom ones actually are the reverse versions. I didn't even know they made a reverse version. But so when I opened the box from Asus, I saw the reverse version. I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. But digression aside, TUF PSU, of course. I think this is the TUF 1000 watt gaming. It's same as the gray one, the gray black TUF. For those of you that like to make your own cables or just interested in what to get when you order cables, I'll let you guys know that the Strix Thor 1, Thor 2, 800 to 1200, and the Aura Gold, white and black, and the TUF Gaming PSUs are all Seasonic, so they all have the same pinout. So technically, even if you had the Thor 1 cables, you could use it with the new Aura Golds. You can use it with the TUF. The only thing you're not going to be able to use is 16 pin, because that's on the ATX3 onlys. But the 8-pin PCIe, the 8-pin, 6-pin PCIe, the 8-pin EPS, 24-pin SATA, and sorry, not SATA, peripheral. They're all the same pinout. So you can reuse your cables if you upgrade your power supply. And obviously the 24-pin as well. So here's the Bitspower CR120 I was talking about. This is the radiator bracket by default. We can mount another one. It's just not ideal for anything that's not an AIO. So, you know, that's just why I didn't use it. I actually did plan to use it in the beginning, but then it was like, you can't even breathe in there, you know. I mean, it's vented back here, but it's so minimal that you're not going to get good airflow. It's just not practical at all. So for AIO, it's great. For everything else, not so much. But it's a great spot for you to hold your reservoir, right? A cylindrical reservoir with the pump may not fit because this part of the case slants out over here, and it's more deep by the motherboard tray here. So you really need to, you might be able to get away with a round reservoir by mounting the pump part over here, but then you're not going to really be able to get your tubing across. So I would suggest something like an FLT with side ports. 360 FLT will be a little too much because, once again, you need the space. So something like this, a CR120, CR240, they all work very well. I have a mixture of fittings on here. I couldn't find my white one. This is the air valve. This is a drain valve, which I then found out that this is blocking it. So anyway, but that's something we can always get to later. And then this is just a temp sensor to measure the water temperature. So that pretty much wraps it up for the back. You can see it's kind of messy, kind of basic, but it is what it is. So with that said, thank you for watching, guys. For those of you going to CES, this will be at the Asus LAN event. Well, it's the Nvidia Lan event, but Asus booth. And then it will move to the Bitspower booth. I forgot where that is. But there it will sit until the end of CES. So for those of you that are going to CES, feel free to check the AlphaCool one out, the Apex. That will be at the Asus booth at the Nvidia Lan event as well. And then going to AlphaCool afterwards. And yeah, so if you're going, have fun. If you're not going, well, watch YouTube. I'm sure the keynote will be very interesting this year from Nvidia. So keep that in mind. All right, thanks for watching. Stay safe and take care.